I hope as we were singing that that music just washed over you like it did me, and I think it's incredibly fitting with where we're at. Um, we just had an opportunity. Some of us had an opportunity to participate in a worldview conference Friday afternoon and all day yesterday till 10 o'clock last night, well 9 o'clock last night, and a lot of it was about our thinking, about changing the way we view things, the way we approach things. And as we move into chapter 12 of Romans, it talks very much about that. And it is in light of the previous 11 chapters that we've been through. And so you cannot do justice to really understanding chapter 12 and how we go about doing those things without understanding what has been laid out before that. I was fascinated. There was portions of it I was not able to catch, but the portions that I was fascinated by the science, the things that were presented about God's creation, just blown away about stuff I've never heard of before, about the way God has designed things to adapt and to adjust and to change. And the more we learn about it, the more complex we realize our world is, the more fascinating we realize our world is, the more we're just like, oh my goodness, who could have ever thought of this? And it could not have happened by chance. No way could it have happened by chance. Even in the wildest dreams could it have happened by chance, that diversity and that uniqueness of God's creation. And the way He's created things to adapt is like in one generation, sometimes in days, sometimes in 24 hours, that changes that will take place in God's creation and creatures to adapt to the surroundings and the circumstances and all. And then to see so much about human history, two different speakers on that. One took us through 6,000 years of human history and man's desire and efforts to control and all the wreckage and destruction as a result of that, as man tries to control everything. And then to see God's plan of redemption. And we look at this in chapters 1 through 11, and I'm just moved with wonder and awe as we were singing there that our God would respond, that He would design what He's designed, and that He would respond in such a way to deal with the brokenness. Man, we live in an incredible world, but we live in an incredibly broken one. Broken one because of sin and the devastation and all the consequences of that. And to go back and to say our only hope is not in ourselves, but in what He has done. To recognize it. And I think that we are moved, Gary, by just awe and wonder as we see this. If we really grasp the depth of what He has created and the depth of the extent of what He went to reconcile us to Himself, it's just like, are you kidding me? Oh my goodness, I cannot believe what He has done for me in my brokenness and for each of us. And it just moves me as we're singing those songs. It moves me to understand, just to get a small glimpse, a small grasp of what our God is like and what He offers us in the midst of all the brokenness that we live in. And so we go, I was looking back at chapter 11 just briefly in the last few verses of that, it said, oh, the depth of the riches both of the wisdom and the knowledge of God, how unsearchable are His judgments and unfathomable His ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has become His counselor, or who has first given to Him that He might be paid back again? For from Him and through Him and to Him are all things. To Him be glory forever. Amen. If we think that somehow that we know better, that we can figure this out better, that we can navigate through the messes of this stuff on our own, we're fooling ourselves. I've fooled myself. I have been fooled so many times by this, to think that somehow, and the glory goes back to Him. So the depth of the riches of the wisdom, the knowledge of God, who can comprehend it? I can't. But as we get a glimpse of it, as we begin to get bigger glimpses of it, I think it just brings us to this place that we're at in chapter 12. I know you were going to go back, Gary, and take a moment, I think, looking back a little bit as well, and I'm just going to be quiet for a moment and allow you to do that.
As I was looking through, there's one verse that came to mind, and I want to read that. I want to start with this. And it's not in Romans, it's in Micah, Old Testament, chapter 6, verses 6 through 8. I want to read this. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with 1,000 rams, with 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I offer my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the seed or for the sin of my soul? He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. And I thought, boy, that fits in right here with what I'm seeing in chapter 12. He's not pleased with burnt offerings. He wants us to understand the things that he has done for us. That should humble us, greatly humble us. We are the ones who are the transgressors. We're the ones who are the guilty. But yet he provides a way out. That's huge. We often think we can tell him how that should be or how that should look. But he doesn't take away our suffering in that. Which is strange because I think I associate that suffering with God's not doing anything here. And yet he might be teaching me. You need to understand this even yet. There's nothing that he hasn't. It's nothing that we're suffering with that he hasn't gone through or experienced. And when we listen to the word mercy, I was thinking about we don't ever hear it more than when we need it the most. When we have messed it up, when we have fallen in the ditch, fallen off the ladder or off the face of the earth, or just blown it completely, God's mercy is still there. It's like, who does that? Incredible.
I hope we get to the point today that I want to go to a passage in Luke that shows an example of that. I was thinking of, in this conference, they were talking about human history and the millions of people that have been butchered in the name of government. The genocide that has occurred, the people that have lost their lives, generations for the cause of Christ. And it's like, where's God in that? He didn't cause it. And then you see the examples of him just giving, and you as you read that passage, I just like, yeah. So we're cast upon him. I mean, where do we have to turn as we keep bringing that passage up with Christ? Where do we have to turn? No one has the answers but him. I don't. I hear you say many times, I'm fresh out of answers. I've said that. I'm fresh out of answers. I don't know.
I keep coming up with a new one. It's above my pay scale. After that conference, listening to these guys, I go, my goodness, their information is in depth. You can see that they have spent a lot of their lives committed to this information and just bringing that so that people can have a better understanding. That was encouraging to me. I thought, wow, these guys are... And they... I was talking to Cal a little bit yesterday, and I said, they stood firm. They weren't making excuses for what the Bible says. They just stood firm with it. This is what we believe. And they were still encouraging and inviting.
And showing evidence.
Yeah.
All that supports what God has said in his word.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the more science uncovers, the more it reveals how ludicrous it is for us to be in that mindset that Romans 1 talks about. Thinking they were wise, they became fools. It just brings out the lunacy of sometimes the views that we would hold on to because we are determined that we know better than, well, there is no God, or we know better than God, or whatever it is in our lives. I don't understand all that he's doing. I don't get it completely, not even a little bit at times. But yet we see his mercy extended towards us. We see his grace extended towards us. We see he promises a way of escape, not to get out necessarily that we're going to be taken out of the circumstances, but to go through what it is in our life. And so when we come to this passage in chapter 12, Paul starts off, I urge you, therefore, and he's looking back, and we cannot go into chapter 12 without beginning to grasp what he has taught us through Romans chapter 1 through 11. So chapter 12 through 15 really focuses on the practical application of what we've been learning in these first 11 chapters. It's really Paul's call to action to focus on applying what we've learned into our daily lives. It means that we're learning to apply what we have been taught, what we've understood, as we sit here this morning, as we walk out of here today, as we go through the course of this day, as we go through the course of tomorrow. For me, it's really come down to it. So I don't know, this is what I think I'm doing today, but often is not what I end up doing today. This is the way I think I'm going to approach something, but then something else comes up. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I don't get it right. I don't know, but it means that we come back to him and say, Lord, would you give me the wisdom and the grace to walk through the affairs of this day and in this circumstance? And so when Paul starts off, I urge you, he is pleading with them to keep in mind what he has taught up to this place. And he says, because of God's mercy. I know you're going to jump in on that one, Gary. Because of God's mercy. Go ahead.
It says in my translation, in view of God's mercy. Some other ones that I were reading, because of God's mercy, by God's mercies. But in view, I like the way that was. When I caught that, I thought, urge. Because he's really going to be starting to tell us how we should act and what we should do and all those things. But first, in view of God's mercy, keep this in view. And I thought, that's exactly right, because I get all self-righteous with all my little works and things, but it's not based on God's mercy. And I was thinking, okay, in view of God's mercy, because that's what he was talking about through all of chapters 1 through, man left to himself is a mess, but God in his mercies. This morning I was reading 1 Peter. It talks about his great mercies, which means many, which means you can't really count them, that many. But he's really kind of honing in on the therefore. I urge you, in view of God's mercy, because of what he just talked about too. And that's what he was talking about in Romans 11, verses 29 through, Wayne read the doxology, so to speak, a little bit later, but just before that it says, and starting in 29, for God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. Wow, that's huge that it comes from him and he maintains it. Just as you, who were at one time disobedient to God, speaking to the Gentiles, have now received mercy as a result of their, speaking of Israel, disobedience. So they, Israel, too, have now become disobedient in order that they too may now. I keep hearing this now. It's like God is keeping us always available. They may now receive mercy as a result of God's mercy to you. For God has bound all men over to disobedience so that he may have mercy on them all. Find that a fascinating statement. Does God intentionally want us to fail? I don't think so. I think that's where this free will comes in. We pick and choose those directions, and when we do, we're disobedient. That's that. He knows all that. He's allowed it so that he can show his mercy. The people who respond to that, that's where we need to be, is responding to the mercy Oh, how I need thee every hour. How I need thee.
I was thinking as you were sharing there, I was thinking of the lyrics of one of the songs we just sang. Faithful you have been, faithful you will be. I pledge myself to, I pledge your, you pledge yourself to me, and that's why I sing. You father the orphans, your kindness makes us whole. You shoulder our weakness, your strength becomes our own. You're making me like you, clothed in white, beauty from ashes, for you will have your bride. Free from all her guilt, free from all her shame, known by her true name, that's why I sing. This is what we are his bride as his children. And it says, he is molding and making us. He says he is. How we go through that is our choice, but he is at work, and he says he will. We saw that in Romans 8, and we see it in Philippians where he says, I am at work. Sometimes we don't get it. We don't understand it. We don't make sense of it. And sometimes it's because of the way that we choose to go forward. Instead of stepping forward when we're poked a little bit in the hock, we want to kick into it. And is there any kickers out there besides me? Yeah, I mean, we don't like it, so we kick against it. So we look at this mercy that he has given to us, and it's just like, wow. God sees our heart, and he's concerned that our actions flow out of a right attitude and a right motivation, out of understanding his mercy that has been extended towards us and learning to extend that towards others, even when they don't deserve it. Guess what? We didn't deserve it. Anybody deserve that?
I was thinking what you just said because it doesn't really say in there, and that'll just be fun. You'll enjoy this one. A lot of times it is everything we got to show mercy. And yet it says to do it cheerfully. And it's like, boy, I fall so short of that all the time. Yet he didn't. I think about what he did to show me mercy, the sufferings that he went through. He stayed the course. He kept his focus. He was serving God. He kept God in mind. His focus was on the Father, and he went to the cross. He didn't waver. And it's like, my goodness.
And as you said, it's everything that we've got. But that isn't even enough. It's really, he wants to show his mercy through us.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to give us something that's supernatural to say, no, I can't do that. I don't want to do that.
Well,
but
I think,
I'm in a place to say, God, I want to allow you to do that through me. Go ahead.
yeah, I think because when we do it, we just puff up. We become self-righteous. Oh, I showed that person some mercy. Disobedient, missed the mark. You know, it's like, Lord, I really need your help. I need, I can't do this. I need your help to show somebody mercy. And in that, something takes place. He definitely gets the credit.
He gets the glory for all of his creation. He wants the glory for the work that he does in our lives to change. I mean, he is the only one that gets credit anyway, but we want to take it, like you said there. And several times throughout the scripture it talks about no, so that he would get the glory for this. So he says in this passage, I urge you. He is imploring, he's pleading with them. He's saying, pay attention to this. By the mercies of God to present. So you read that passage in Micah. He's not interested in burnt offerings and all these other things. I mean, he instituted that stuff. He says you should do this, but he wasn't. What was he interested in? That they would do it with the right heart. He knows our heart. Can any of us deceive God? Can anybody of us hide our own motives? Yeah, we can think what our motives are. I don't even know what my motives are sometimes. I don't know when they're pure, when they're not. I surely don't know when yours are. He says that he wants us to offer ourselves. What do we have to offer? Brokenness.
Psalm 51. Pam mentioned that this morning. A broken and contrite heart is what's pleasing to God. It's not a fun place to be, but he does restore.
But yeah, he restores. He says to present to give. God's grace provides both the means and the motivation by which we can live out these instructions in this next chapter. He has chosen us sovereignly. We didn't choose him. He chose us. He asked us to respond by faith. Abraham responded by faith. I was interested in one of the sessions I missed a portion, I got a portion of that said that the guy was talking about all the failures. He's talking about, Abraham obeyed God and went to another land, but then Abraham did some things. A couple times, wasn't it him that said, well, this is not my wife, this is my sister? What? I mean, there's things in his life that he did not. Well, God needs some help out, so I'm going to go sleep with. What? We look after these examples after examples. David, we just go back and look at his life. It's like, that's a train wreck. Yet, his heart was turned towards the Lord, and God said, he's a man after my own heart. Not because of all of his great things he did, because he was drawn back. And God has chosen us sovereignly. He himself provides the means by which our death sentence was paid and we could be reconciled to him. He himself provided that. He has given us his Holy Spirit to reside within us and to help us. He's given us free will to choose to worship him and to live our lives pleasing to him. It is our choice. To present ourselves. Recognizing that that might not be such a great gift, humanly speaking, but it's the very thing that he desires of us, is that in view of his mercies, our maybe supernatural response is to say, oh my goodness, because of your incredible grace, because of the complexity of your creation, all that I see around me, I can do nothing less than worship you and say, wow. And what do you ask of me? To trust you. Trust first by faith in his salvation and what he has done to reconcile us. And then secondly, to trust by faith that we can trust him with our lives that he asks us to present as a living sacrifice.
So in view of God's mercy, thinking, what is that? I've been recognizing that I jump to my own thoughts and what I think things mean, and so I do have to go back and get anchored with, okay, does that what it really means? Because you have a tendency to start thinking you actually know what that means based on the things we hear, our worldview, all sorts of issues. And I actually looked it up to make sure we had a good, clear picture of this before moving forward. And it talks about to have pity, talks about to have compassion, heartfelt emotion for someone's misfortunes. And I got to thinking about that in relationship to the cross, because that's what he did. Our misfortunes, we at some point missed the mark, and now we're in that condemned state, the cursed state. He has compassion, a heartfelt emotion, and therefore had a plan. And obviously he had this before he even created us, but it just shows his character, that mercy, that compassion. Thy mercies never fail. It's like, why wouldn't we want to run to him?
There's a couple passages that I was doing some reading and it made reference to. In Galatians 2, chapter 2, verse 20, it says, I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. That was in the ESV. I'm going to read that in the NLT. If you want to put that up, please. It says, my old self has been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. So I live in this earthly body by trusting in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Do we trust him? I think we have every reason to trust him because he's trustworthy. In Romans 6, in the maybe I'll read that in the NLT as well. I've got a couple of them here, but Romans 6 verse 12, starting with verse 12. Do not let sin control the way you live. Do not give in to sinful desires. Do not let any part of your body become an instrument of evil to serve sin. Instead, give yourselves completely to God, for you were dead, but now you have new life. So use the whole body as an instrument to do what is right for the glory of God. Sin is no longer your master, for you no longer live under the requirements of the law. Instead, you live under the freedom of God's grace.
Can I borrow your pencil there? I'll scratch that one off my list here. Right, that's what I.
You can take it from here. Go ahead. Read it in your version.
No, you covered it well.
This is what's been done for us. Sin is no longer our master. No, we can choose what we're going to do with it. For you're no longer to live under the requirement. We no longer live under the requirements of the law. We instead live under the freedom of God's grace. We have a choice in this. And the choice that Paul is urging us in the midst of this is that we would present ourselves. Now, what do we have to offer? Some of us, our bodies are pretty broken by the ravages of old age. And the rest of us are on that scale as well. We're headed there. Some of us further along than others. And I'm not trying to just bring that up other than to say whatever we have is what we have to offer. Physically speaking, we may not have what we used to have. It might be mentally that we don't have what we used to have. I don't know what it is. It isn't about whether we have all of the qualities. I remember them on this conference. They were showing a couple pictures of a guy, Arnold Schwarzenegger, back when he had all the big muscles and stuff. Not that I think that's really cool. I mean, some people think that's really cool. I just like, oh. And so, he's really supposedly strong. At least he looks like it. And then they showed a guy with muscular dystrophy. What we have is what we have to present. It's not about the present. It's about the willingness to allow God to use us. And to go back to Mama's dad, Joe, I think most of us know Joe. Before he passed away the last year or so, a couple times he asked me, Wayne, why is God keeping me here? Because he wanted to go. He knew where he was going. He knew his relationship with the Lord. That was assured. That he was confident of that. Why is the Lord keeping me here? I said, I don't know, but he has a reason. And even in the last couple of weeks, I've had individuals say to me how much Joe's life impacted their lives and how much he cared for them. And I have no idea what that impact was in that last year when he was so ready that he just I want to go. And yet, for whatever reason, God allowed him to be here a while longer. What did he have to present? Well, humanly speaking, a lot. But I think as far as the Lord is concerned, we can think of individuals that have passed on from this body here, and others of us that were wondering how much time do we have left. It's not about that. It's about our heart recognizing the mercies of God and saying, I haven't got much. At least it doesn't appear like that humanly speaking, or at least in my mind, I haven't got much. He just asked me to do it, so I'm going to, in view of his mercies, I'm going to do that and choose this afternoon and tomorrow and again the next day to make that choice to present myself, as Paul is urging us to, as a living and holy sacrifice. Living, we're still breathing, we're still upright, And and holy, how holy are we? Well, we're holy not because of what we've done, but because of what he has done in us. He has dealt with the issue of sin. There is no more guilt and shame because of it. Yes, there's consequences and stuff we struggle with on this, and sometimes it gets brought up in unhealthy ways and things like that. But in view of what he has done, is it dealt with? Absolutely. The infinite God chose to come and to pay the penalty for my sin in my place and to deal with that. And so the holiness isn't of ourselves, it's in what he has done and turning us, as we sang in that song, to be his bride.
What is pleasing? I was thinking about the sacrifices and the holy and stuff. And then what is pleasing? What is pleasing to God? I mean, I don't know about you, but I jump through hoops sometimes trying to figure that out. Like, oh, I got to look a certain way, or I got to act a certain way, or I got to be a certain thing. It's been a large part of my years doing that. But when you start reading, he gives me the instruction in order that I might be pleasing to him. In Micah, what we read this morning, you know, to act justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with God, that's pleasing. It says so. The pleasing to God, I think, is understanding what he has done for us, and in view of that, to literally just start trying to obey the things that he says. Not that we get to do this to get into heaven, but because he has provided for us sinners a way to get to be with him. If we do that way, that's pleasing to him. I don't think it pleases him when we're trying to do it on our own effort. Paul talked about that in previous chapters over and over and over. So why is it that we keep trying to do that? I think it has a lot to do with being exposed of our sin, laying it right out there, everything. Let me tell you everything, confessing it, being honest, getting to the point of it. That's a hard place to be. So instead of doing that, we spend a lot of time making ourselves look good, and it's just a dead-end street. That's not pleasing to God. How could it be pleasing to tell God the things that I've done, the attitudes that I've had, the things that I missed intentionally? I'm not going to do that. That's pride, you know. It comes to mind more than you know, Mario. Pride. But it kind of is. You know, it really is. That's not pleasing.
I want to read the example that Jesus gave, or that happened in Jesus' life, and this is out of Luke chapter 7. I'm going to read it out of the NLT, starting with verse 36. This is one of the Pharisees asked Jesus to come to dinner with him. So Jesus went to his home and sat down to eat. When a certain immoral woman from the city heard he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with an expensive perfume. Then she knelt behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She's a sinner." Then Jesus answered his thoughts. Listen to this. I mean, he was thinking this, and Jesus answered his thoughts. "Simon," he said to the Pharisee, "I have something to say to you." "Go ahead, teacher," Simon replied. Then Jesus told him this story. A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 to another. But neither of them could repay him. So he kindly forgave them both, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose loved him more after that? Simon answered, "I suppose the one whom he canceled the larger debt." "That's right," Jesus said. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, "Look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I first came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, and she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven. So she has shown me much love. A person who is forgiven little shows very little love." Then Jesus said to the woman, "Your sins are forgiven." The men at the table said among themselves, "Who is this man that he goes around forgiving sins?" Jesus said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." See, the religious guy is like, she shouldn't be touching you. You shouldn't have anything to do with her because she's a... And he said, she recognizes that I am the Christ. And she's responding to that with what she has, her tears, her touch, this perfume that she brought. She doesn't know what else to do. I mean, some of this is me saying, I mean, what does she do? She is an outcast, an immoral, a nobody. And yet she comes in and she anoints his feet, and he says, that's a sacrifice. I mean, he didn't say that, but that's this kind of sacrifice I think Paul is talking about here. It's what we have to offer, which, however broken it is, it comes back to that very thing. And we're not going to have time to get into it today, but as we get into the next verse, he talks about the renewing of our mind, because I have come to realize more and more, and as we were going to this conference and as we've been studying the Word, how literally messed up my mind is. How much we have bought into this world system. It doesn't probably happen as much anymore because we all now have cell phones and we see who's calling, and it's usually the person that actually, but when we had regular phones, somebody picks up the phone, we have no idea who's going to answer that phone other than who might be home. So have you ever got on the phone and called somebody and you started talking to them thinking that you were talking to the dad or the mom, and only to find out that it was the daughter or the son? Has that happened to you before? Their voice patterns, the way they talk, everything about them just played off as if it was the adult in the family, the parent in the family. How does that happen? Well, it happens because they spent a whole lot of time listening to those voice patterns and all those things. We have spent a whole lot of time. We came into this world broken, first of all, because of sin, because we were born into it. And secondly, that's what we've been trained in. We've been trained in it in our educational system. We've been trained in it in the unhealthy patterns we've learned from parents and things like that. So we are messed up in our thinking. And he talks about change, are being transformed in those areas. And it's recognizing these things, to present ourselves to him, to say, all I have to offer is what I have to offer, which is brokenness. All I have to offer is a mind that is messed up. All I have to offer is not a lot, other than, he says, present myself as a living sacrifice. And in that, he talks about what he wants to do in and through us. So this woman came with her, what little she had, and God said, you are forgiven because of your faith. And he used it as an example of faith for all of us to say, we can come just like that.
And be accepted. I think that's our biggest fear, is we're afraid of rejection, a fear of not being accepted. We don't really know what it's about, but we'll just pretend anyways. And that fear of being that way or not being a certain way interferes with, I don't care if I look like an idiot, and when I go play a song in front of people. I have had that thought. It's like, God, the only reason I'm doing this is because I know that you've been good to me. I'm not saying I'm any good, But you say, sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. I'm going to go do it. If I look like an idiot, so be it. I don't know why that fear's there. It's always acceptable to him if I'm doing it with gratitude, based on the things that I know that he's done for me. And in that, you hope that maybe somebody will be inspired or spurred on to do something. And I was thinking about that. This whole picture is that we progress the gospel. It's kind of what these guys were talking about. It's why they're doing all this, is so that the good news will go out, so that people will understand that God is a merciful and kind God, wanting a relationship with them, despite their warts, as you would put it. You're accepted. It's been paid for. It is finished. Just come, and we'll work out the details.
I mean, think about this woman. Think about it. She had the gall to enter a Pharisee's house. I say the gall because that would probably not have been a natural place for her to be accepted. Do you think? And it became quite apparent from what Simon was thinking, and then Jesus responded to. And she came and just kept kissing his feet. That would be really weird in our culture. Probably wasn't something you did continually in their culture even. I don't know the full details of their culture. We can go back and explore that. But she was washing with her tears. She was using her hair to wipe his feet. It may seem weird, but what did she have to offer other than, I recognize that you are the Son of God, and this is what I have to offer.
Isn't that stem of I hope? Yet he's saying, yeah, I'm giving you that hope. And therefore that hope is like, it's like sticking your head through something, being unchained, being freed. That hope is everything that God is providing for us. Because without it, we know what that Pharisee's thinking of me. I got no hope. I'm not accepted by them. I'm always an outcast. God's not doing that to me. It's an awesome picture.
Sorry, I lost my thought. I was, as I was contemplating this and thinking about all that's gone before this up to this point, and then we come to this place in chapter 12 where he says, present ourselves. God knows the heart. God knew the heart of this woman. God knew the heart of the widow that gave the mite. God knew the heart of the ones that were giving it. Let's just raise it up as high as we could and make it sure it jingles a lot as it drops and it hits, and everybody's going to turn and see, wow, he gave a lot. And God knows the heart. And he's not looking for the external sacrifices or the shows or the look at me. You know how much I fight against some of that. I'm going to have to be dead if you're going to get some of the garb on that would make it look like I'm somebody. It really comes back to this, is that we stand before a God that is beyond in any comprehension, that has gone to the extreme extent of taking care of the just requirements, his perfect just requirements, that sin's penalty be paid, that he placed it upon his Son, that he offers it to us, and he asks us to accept that by faith, and he asks us to live our life each day by faith.
And if I can add to that, he does not force it. He gives it a free choice. One of the speakers that was there this weekend was speaking about all the kings of the world and how everybody that wasn't a king you're a slave in a sense. So it's a top-down hierarchy. And if I can just climb up there somewhere, I'll be more important than that guy. He said, Christ flipped it upside down. We serve. We get underneath, we serve, we lift up, we build up. And he even brought that verse out about, do you not want to leave also? And they said, where will we go? He didn't force anybody to do it. He gave everybody free choice and free will. I'm providing something for you. And that something is what I keep thinking we're missing. We keep thinking that it's, this is what he said, or this is what I think I get you. No. If you really focus in on that something, that cross, that grace, that mercy, that compassion that he truly has for us, if we can understand better who it is that's doing this, it's like, who doesn't want to be there? Who doesn't want that?
Yeah, I think it really comes back to it. If we understand this, we come to that place to recognizing that, are you kidding me? This is what's been offered to me. I can accept it or I can reject it. Choice is mine. I can walk in His grace. I can walk in the love that has been expended to me. I can offer myself as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable. Holy and acceptable because of what He's done, not because of what I've done. An incredible place to be. Mm-hmm. An incredible place to be. Any final thoughts?
No, I keep seeing that. I was just thinking about, I've been into churches before where people have been, bowed down right in the congregation during the service. And you always kind of go, is that an act, or is that really how somebody feels? And they're really not too concerned about, can you do that in church? Should we do that? People that lift their arms to the Lord, is that real? Is it, and that's where it all comes back to, is like you're talking about, God knows the heart. We can pretend to have a position, or I can say, I don't really care who thinks what. And if it's them intentions are right, they're pleasing. And I think it is. It's just recognizing the things that He's done for us, and being Psalms, I don't know the chapter, but it says, I will glorify the Lord with thanksgiving. Being grateful is really pleasing to God. I have a tendency to look at the things that I don't have yet, thinking it'll make me more happy, rather than stopping and going, wow, Lord, so many things to be thankful for. So many things.
Amen.